Well, hello there. It is great to see you, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Lessons by the Lake, the Oswego Private Wealth Show. I am your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff, and in a few moments, we'll be introducing you really to the star of our show, and that's Mr. Bob Bedritis, the managing director of Oswego Private Wealth Management. But look, before we bring Bob on, first thing I want to do is kind of set the scene for you, our audience, as to what you can expect really on this show moving forward. You see, each episode, Bob and I are going to be getting together and we're going to be diving into some of the same strategies, concepts, solutions, and really wealth management discussions that he's having with his clients on a regular basis over at Oswego Private Wealth. Each episode will pack a new wealth management strategy into it. We'll be addressing the ins and outs of it, why it's beneficial in the first place, who these strategies might be applicable for, and so much more. And the best part is we want to get your feedback as we're going through this show moving forward. So on whichever platform that you're checking us out on, always feel free to leave a comment or a question below. Our teams will be monitoring those boxes, and we'll make sure that any questions or topics that you'd like us to address moving forward, we can certainly carve out some time to address them in future episodes. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and bring Bob aboard to get today's conversation started before we dive into the topic at hand. So let's bring him out. Bob, good to see you. Welcome aboard today. How you doing?
Thanks, Ryan. I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to be here with you, Bob. We've been talking about doing this show for a while, and here we are. We're sitting down to record the first episode today. And Bob, I think before, though, we get into really the first topic that we're going to be addressing here today, it'd be beneficial for our audience if you kind of set the scene a little bit and provide an overview on really Oswego Private Wealth Management as a whole, yourself, share a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Well, I worked 20 years on Wall Street with two firms, Merrill Lynch and Payne Weber, ultimately UBS. Moved to Oregon 21 years ago and started Oswego Private Wealth Management only 7 years ago because I felt there was a need for comprehensive wealth management for business owners, those of closely held businesses and family businesses, as well as high net worth individuals. And we work with business owners to make them financially independent of their businesses. And we work very closely with outside advisors, attorneys, accountants, property and casualty, life insurance experts. And so we want to bring a comprehensive wealth management plan and advanced planning through the concept of a virtual family office to high net worth individuals and business owners.
Bob, I love that. And one of the great things about what it is that you do with that virtual family office is that there's a lot that's going on with that. And we're going to be addressing some of the various strategies and solutions that are packed into you and your team and the virtual family office that you bring to the table for your clients in our episodes that are to come, starting with today's topic. And today's topic, what we're going to be doing is we're going to, be having you unpack really this universally applicable strategy for just about anybody. But before we get into really what it is, I think it really helps to frame it up a little bit. And as I was thinking about how I wanted to do this today, I kept coming back to this one word, Bob, of uncertainty. I mean, if you want to talk about uncertainty, take a look at the last few years that we've all experienced between COVID-19 pandemic, a presidential election, of course, the financial turmoil in the markets that we experienced during all of that time, just so much uncertainty out there for people. So let's start today by talking about what it is that people can be doing right now with their money to just kind of give them a little more confidence, given all of this level of uncertainty that's happening these days. What can they be doing, Bob?
Well, I think most people would agree that times have really changed over the last 2 years with the political, economic, social changes, all of the uncertainty that's going on in our world around us today. And plans cannot be static. The plans that we make in financial planning, wealth management, advanced planning need to move forward and be reviewed periodically from time to time. Family offices, those with 500 million or more, 80% of family offices all have brought in another set of eyes to review the work that the family office does with their multi-million-dollar salaries and very expensive office space for those individual families. And the studies show that in the last 5 years, 80% of the CEOs of the family offices have brought in a consultant, another set of eyes to review what they're doing to look for gaps in their planning. Well, that's what we do. The second opinion, the stress test, which is what we use, a stress test on what one is doing. That is our second set of eyes to take a look at the past, what's been done up until now, and review that plan to test the assumptions of the plan that they have in place right now, both current and proposed, and then to move forward and look for gaps in that planning and to improve the client's situation.
I love that. So really stress testing. That's what we're getting into today, guys. That's the heart of the conversation. Bob, let's get into the why now. Why is it that you would say this is such a valuable process that affluent families or business owners should be considering these days, given all the, unlikeliness and uncertainty that's going on in our world right now?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Because of everything that's going on in our world, it's a different place today than it was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, certainly 2 years ago. And I promise you that the future is going to be different as well for everybody's personal situations. And I believe that people should stress test and look at their portfolios, and not just the X's and O's, not just the technical aspects of their plans, but also the human element. Because babies are born, businesses are sold, situations change, and this should be a dynamic process. It should be continuing on throughout the relationship of a wealth manager and the client, and should not just be a one-time, one and done, and never look at it again.
Sure, sure. So it sounds to me, Bob, that and I want to touch on that word that you just mentioned a moment ago, the human element, in just a moment. But really, if we're going to boil it down to just a few, key ways that stress tests can, or methods rather, that stress tests can evaluate, could you maybe share for us what these three main ways can be on what a stress test really looks into?
Well, sure. I mean, I think the first thing that a stress test looks at is it reviews the plans one's currently doing. Where the money, what do the trusts look like, the wills, uh, business owners, how are you structured as a corporation, an LLC, an S corp, on and on and on, sole proprietor, and it looks at where you are today. And then we want the second part of the plan is we want to test the assumptions. We want to test that both and stress test it, whether in good times, bad times, and everything in between, and make sure we understand what variables could do to that plan. And then at the end, we look for gaps. Ultimately, we look for gaps. A plan may have been beautifully written and conceived and put together 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but situations changed. And over that period of time, we find gaps in the client's planning. And that's what we're really doing, Ryan, is we're looking for the gaps in the planning. I like to use a phrase that I learned many years ago called DOS, dangers, opportunities, and strengths. And we look at it with that critical eye of looking for what are the dangers of this plan? What could go wrong? Where are the opportunities? What's available today that may not have been available in the past? Or if it was, we didn't take advantage of it. And what opportunities do we have? And then what are the strengths of the plan that we can make sure that we really solidify this plan so it achieves what the client's trying to achieve?
All right, Bob. So I hear you loud and clear. Three main ways that a stress test can be utilized. Let's dive into maybe an example next for our audience. Do you have an example for us? And it could be real. This could be maybe even a hypothetical one of maybe why somebody was prompted to come see you and your team at Oswego Private Wealth about a stress test. Do you have anything for us in that vein?
Yeah, well, I can give you two. The first one is somebody who was recently prompted to come to me and our team. And this particular couple, there was an age gap, husband 80 years old, wife 60 years old. At first marriage, they've been married now almost 40 years, but there's an age gap. And all of the plans, the trust, they own significant real estate, investment accounts, rental properties, lots and lots of moving parts, very complex estate. And the plans that were put into place were perfect. I would say they were perfect. They were done by somebody, not me, when they were put into place. But now what's happened is the 80-year-old patriarch of the family now has health issues. And he's beginning to, and oh, by the way, he also handled all the finances. His wife took at most a casual interest in what was going on. And now that he's embracing the idea of his mortality and his deep love for his wife, he's thinking about, how do I make sure that she's well taken care of? So that was the impetus for us to begin and to do the stress test. And we uncovered quite a few gaps of things that can be improved upon in order to create a better situation, so that the husband would know that when he moves on to the next phase of his eternity, that his wife is taken care of. She knows the advisor, she has a working understanding of what's going on, and there's somebody that she trusts to help to guide her through that process. So that's a relatively new one. There's another situation I have that's been a client of mine for quite a long time now, and he has a business. It's a manufacturing business, very, very successful. And he's been talking about retiring and selling the business in the next 3 years for about the last decade now. And we've been doing the planning along those lines to make sure they're in a place of most opportunity to be ready to do those things, to make sure the structures are right, and all the situation and everything around that. Well, lo and behold, right around the fourth quarter, right around the holidays, Thanksgiving last year, a buyer magically appeared, unexpected, that is the perfect buyer for this company. And I was very gratified to know, the client was very gratified to know that he's ready. We've done all the things we needed to do for the successful sale of this business. Now, we're still in negotiations on that. It hasn't occurred yet, but he's well taken care of, and he's in good hands. And all of his advisors, his CPA, his M&A attorney, his estate planning attorney, myself, we're all on the same page, having discussions around the best interest of our client to make sure he maximizes the monetization of his company that he spent his entire life building.
Oh, Bob, those are two great examples because they showcase how when you stress test and you do it on a regular basis, you can have the opportunity to know that when a big moment like that, like the sale of your business, is up and coming, that you've made sure the right decisions have been made on the front end to position you for an even more successful back end. So I love those examples for that reason. But Bob, I kind of want to flip it to the next layer of examples, and that would be: do you maybe have an example for us where a stress test was conducted for a client? Maybe they weren't even a client, of yours at that time, and maybe even saved them from some sort of mistake or negative financial repercussion. Do you have anything like that for us to share with?
Well, unfortunately, I have more than one, but
Yeah.
I'll share one with. Well, actually, fortunately, because we saved them. We had a very aggressive business owner, aggressive in the sense that he had gotten lots of advice, paid a lot of legal fees, and had structured trust upon trust upon trust, and had transferred his business into one trust to avoid capital gains and any potential estate taxes down the road. He had transferred some real estate into another trust, doing those same kind of things. The other thing that he did is he felt that diversification, before we met, in the financial services arena meant you get 4 different advisors as opposed to one advisor who diversifies you. And so, number one, on the trust, we found that he was really not just on the line, but over the line, that the advisors he had in the past didn't really serve him well, because it was, tax avoidance is great, tax evasion isn't. There's a line there, and he was really aggressively on that line and needed to be saved, if you will, from those kinds of decisions, and needed to get more information to understand that. And in terms of the financial portfolio they had set up, finding 4 different advisors or 3 different advisors or 2 different advisors isn't diversification necessarily, because in that situation, if advisor A, advisor B, advisor C, advisor D, they don't know what the other advisor is doing, the wealth manager is doing. And so you feel you're very well diversified. So because you have 4 different individuals taking care of this for you. Well, what we found is that when we did a deep dive in the stress test and analyzed that portfolio down to every stock owned, the real estate owned, the bonds that were owned, we found that there was an overlap of 83% in those portfolios. So every single advisor owned ExxonMobil, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Home Depot, Walmart, so on and so forth. So he truly was not, he didn't know it, but he just truly was not diversified. He just had 4 different advisors all on their separate paths without any coordination, basically buying him the same type of portfolio. And there wasn't a lot of difference in that. So I feel that we did a good job there in helping him understand what some of the problems were with what he had created and to rectify that and make.
Yeah, Bob. So I mean, we've got a handful of examples from you there, just on the effectiveness and the really the value that's associated with this stress testing process. But I think now it would help our audience a bit if we shift now to just kind of the keys to having a stress test done well. You see, I mean, yes, this can be a valuable process, but how do we maximize the value within the process itself? What are your keys, Bob, to making sure a stress test is done well? And I believe you flirted with it a little earlier when you mentioned the human element, but I'll let you take it from here.
Well, let me take on the human element second, if I will.
Mm-hmm.
And the first is competence. You really want someone who is best of class at what they do, whether it's your legal counsel, whether it's accounting, whether it's wealth management. You want somebody who's an elite wealth manager, an elite accountant, an elite attorney. You want somebody who specializes in people who look just like you, that have the same kind of problems, the issues, the same dangers, opportunities, and strengths that you do, generically speaking, right? In terms of strengths, but you want people that have the same kind of issues you want a specialist. So with that as a starting point, then I think the human element comes into play massively, because we're all different. And on paper, somebody may look exactly the same. If I just looked somebody's investment portfolio and their real estate portfolio, I wouldn't be able to make a huge differentiation between one client and another client, but it's getting to know them, and if I could throw up a screen, if I will, there's a screen that what we do in our process is we do something we call a discovery meeting. And in that discovery meeting, we put up and do what I call the total client profile. So it's an extensive questionnaire that operates in 7 different areas. I first want to get to know you, and I want to know what are your values. What do you care about? How do you feel about money? What's money mean to you? What's the purpose of it? And then we talk about goals. We get a little more granular, and we talk about what are the goals? What are the things that you want to achieve with how many more years you have on this that God gives you, right? And what are you trying to achieve? Then we talk about relationships. Who's important to you? What relationships matter? The spouse, the children certainly come to play pretty quickly, but we can find siblings, we can find key employees for business owners, we can find cousins, we can find neighbors, and I want to understand those relationships. Then the fourth aspect of this, I get down to assets. I mean, and this, by the way, is where most financial advisors start. They just say, show me the money, show me where the money's at. That's where our starting point is. That's just the fourth area that we look at. And yes, we do need to know that. And we have technical expertise, and we want to know where are the assets, how are they structured, and so on and so forth. And then we would talk about advisors. I don't believe that anybody should be doing something in a vacuum and not let all their advisors in on the relationships with the others. And so who is your CPA? Who is your attorney? Who are your close advisors? Many of our business owners have business coaches, and I want to understand who those folks are. And then we move on to process. And process is simply, we have a process at Oswego Private Wealth Management, but I also want to know how do you, as the client, how do you want to work? Do you prefer the phone call? Do you prefer the email? Do you like meeting frequently or a little less frequently, but just allow me to keep you updated on key things? Should we meet by Zoom, which we've all seemed to have gotten very comfortable doing these days in these last 2 years, or are face-to-face meetings best? Who should be in those meetings? And we want to understand that. And then last of all, I want to understand a little bit about you. I'll share about myself, what matters most to me, but I want to find out what your interests in things you're involved in, what charities you're involved in, if any. Do you run every day? Do you go play tennis like I do? Or are you a golfer, which I'm not? I'm not much of a golfer. I tear up a lot of golf courses time to time, but nobody would call me a golfer. And so we just want to understand as much as we can about a client, and that's critical to everything we do. And then if I could just add one more piece to that picture, and that would be the way the way the profiling works. So the profiling is what we call our discovery meeting. And that's where I want to understand as much as I can about the human element. And then we will evaluate your existing or proposed services and products that you might have in front of you that prompted you to come to see us. And then by learning the human element and then digging into the technical aspects of what you have, that's where we'll test the assumptions. And then we'll make sure we're aligning what you've done already, what you hope to do in the future, and we'll evaluate that alignment with your goals. And very important is to calculate the cost structure, because there's a great variance in cost structures in what we do. And then we'll follow up with and address alternative services and products and recommend a course of action for a client. And that's the process that we use. And that's what somebody can expect when they work with me and Oswego Private Wealth, that we'll go through this process before we ever invite you in to become a client, before we ever ask you to make a decision. I believe in transparency. First of all, I don't think anybody should ever do anything financially unless they fully and completely understand what's being proposed to them. And I try very hard, and I think we succeed, to simplify the complex and to make it understandable. And the plans can become very complex, but a client should never move forward with something if they can't fully understand what's being proposed to them.
You know, Bob, I love that total client profile for so many reasons, but really from the client standpoint, it allows them to connect with you on that deeper level, to share those, you had mentioned the conversation starts with values and goals, aspirations for the future. I mean, those are some deep, heavy hitting conversations that will certainly drive where what they want their money to do for them and their family, and how they want it to be spent and to be achieved and matriculate maybe to future generations. There's just a lot of great conversations that happen within that whole total client profile. And I was going to ask you to kind of walk us through that, and I appreciate you doing it, because one thing that we didn't want to get away from this episode without our audience realizing is what that discovery process, what this whole stress test really looks like and feels like. And so there you have it, folks. I mean, there's that total client profile, those questions that Bob is going through during the stress testing process. That's it. It's to get the snapshot of your current portfolio, to see, what the alternative services or products might be for you. And then of course to test some of those out, figure out what works best for you, and then recommend that course of action. Bob, for anybody that's out in our audience today, that they enjoyed the total client profile idea, and maybe they're sitting and they're thinking to themselves, man, this stress testing idea sounds like there's some value here. It may be worth checking into. And maybe they're interested in reaching out to you and your team over at Oswego Private Wealth for just a little more information, maybe even to start that process, to start that discussion with you. How would you say is the best method they should go about reaching out to get that ball rolling with you guys?
Best way to reach us is always to just start with our website. Go to oswegoprivatewealth.com. Start with our website. You'll see some different videos, some more explanation of what we do. And then we have created a white paper on the importance of stress testing your wealth strategies. And it talks about the key takeaways. Stress testing is common practice among the affluent, helps you see if your current situation is likely to deliver the results that you want and need. And it can be done in multiple areas. We can do a comprehensive stress test on everything, or you might come in with just a focused area that you want to just stress test 1 or 2 or 3 areas of your plan. And then from that, again, this is all a part of the report. We talk about how this process works, from the profiling to the solutions, solution evaluation, working the assumptions, evaluating and aligning goals and objectives, doing those analytic comparisons, and ultimately us making recommendations. And then last of all, just talks a little bit more about the growing importance of stress testing and what you can expect from the process. So this is something that we can provide for anybody who's interested in learning more. Again, starting point, start at our website. And from there, we have our telephone number. You can give us a call, set up a meeting. You can schedule a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting. All available, all choices available. And you can download this report if you choose to.
Fantastic. Well, Bob, look, I appreciate you carving some time out of your day to be with us here on the inaugural episode and walk through this stress testing process with us, which I'm sure we are bound to bring up in some episodes to come on some future conversations that we'll have. But look, I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking forward to being back with you for our next episode.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, and hey, we want to take one final moment, as always, to thank you guys for jumping aboard and being a part of the show today. And do us a favor, if you liked what you saw, maybe you benefited and took anything away from the conversation today, go ahead and like the show, comment on it, subscribe to the show, whichever platform you're checking us out on, and then of course share this information with friends, family, business owners, anybody that you feel would benefit from these types of conversations. At the end of the day, these are the Lessons by the Lake. This is the Oswego Private Wealth Management Show, and we are bringing the same strategies, solutions, tips, conversations that Bob is having with his clients regularly over at his office right to you guys through this show. We've got some great conversations teed up in episodes to come, some awesome solutions and strategies that we want to chat through that we would hate to have you miss out on. So be sure to head over to the Oswego Private Wealth Management Facebook page, of course, OswegoPrivateWealth.com, for updates as to when we're going to be releasing new episodes for this show moving forward. So for Mr. Bob Bedritis, I'm Ryan Ruff. We're going to go ahead and say so long, but we so appreciate you guys being with us here on the inaugural episode of Lessons by the Lake.